Hello everyone, welcome back to day 6 of our 2-week-long California road trip. If you missed the last episode, I'd highly encourage you to go back and watch it as I visit Sequoia National Park for the first time. Understanding that park, its location, and its natural features are vital in understanding Kings Canyon National Park, which was the place we'd be visiting for the first time today. While technically two separate national parks, Sequoia and Kings Canyon are jointly administered by the National Park Service and likewise only require an admission fee from one park or the other. The two national parks can be best identified by each of their focal points. It's clear to me that Sequoia National Park puts greater emphasis on the Sequoia tree, while Kings Canyon National Park has a bigger size and scale of its granite cliffs. That said, things get a little bit confusing when you consider that Kings Canyon National Park has its own section devoted to Sequoia trees, and Sequoia National Park has various hikes that expose visitors to granite peaks too. In many ways, these two parks feel like one big national park, which is why you shouldn't see one without seeing the other. It's for that reason I was surprised when I discovered that Sequoia National Park's annual attendance is almost double that of Kings Canyon National Park. Now, I have a bold take to share at the end of the video, but for the time being, let's just say that this should not be the case. The previous night, we had gone just outside of park boundary so that we weren't illegally sleeping anywhere, and thus we were greeted by bright yellow ground once again. While we're taking in the transition from yellow plains to lush forestry, we noticed a wild turkey crossing the road. Nothing screams road trip more than that. Eventually, we reached the beginning of Kings Canyon National Park and instead of continuing on the main road, turned off for the park's popular Grant Grove section. This is where you're going to find the General Grant tree, the second largest sequoia tree just after General Sherman over at Sequoia National Park. The whole area is gorgeous and the trees are indescribably massive. Just take a look at these things next to the parking lot restroom, they're huge. Once we made our way to the General Grant tree, my brother and I agreed that it was actually more impressive than its counterpart General Sherman. While technically this one is a bit shorter and less wide, it stands out more in the General Grove section of the park. There were also far fewer crowds, making it more tranquil and easy to get the best pictures and videos. Nearby, we noticed a fallen sequoia tree whose trunk was carved for people to walk in, so that only added to the fun. Needless to say, this was a great start to our day and it was now time to venture onto the Kings Canyon Scenic Byway. This 50-mile roadway technically begins in the foothills of Fresno, California, but the real action begins once you've passed the General Grove section of the park. From there, you're welcome to take in one of California's most scenic drives and pull off wherever you see a view of interest. The deeper you go into Kings Canyon, the more dramatic the views become. It's an absolutely amazing experience and easily the park's signature attraction. Our first experience on the road was met with a bird who guided our vehicle through the byway for almost a mile. It's not like the road stays straight, the bird was just winding around and following our car, which was so cool. Now, there's nothing I'd recommend more than stopping midway to the valley floor. The steep cliffs and river snaking its way through the valley floor are unbelievable to witness. Once you reach the bottom of the canyon, you'll be leveled with the aforementioned river and will start to notice some trails pop up. This is where the hiking begins, and at the end of the scenic byway, there's opportunities for backpacking trips too. Our first stop off the road is Grizzly Falls. This is a short walk from the parking lot rather than a hike, and it's an absolutely beautiful waterfall. It's kind of split into two halves with a stronger and more captivating portion on the right-hand side. To the left is a gentler flow down to the bottom, which is stunning in its own right too. Grizzly Falls is only visible from the right side unless you decide to rock hop across the shallow river, which of course we had to do. I have to admit, the views were about equal no matter where you were, so it wasn't really worth the cross. After Grizzly Falls, we weren't quite done with waterfalls. Roaring River Falls is just a few miles away, flowing straight into the Roaring River, which you cross on a bridge via the scenic byway. The easy half-mile trail brings you up close to the waterfall and the dramatic steep cliff backdrop. Now, in all the videos I took of Roaring River Falls, it looks like the smallest thing ever, but it's actually a decent bit bigger in person than we expected, and it was flowing really well. I personally thought this was one of the best waterfalls of the trip, and even better than Topeka Falls, which we saw one day previously at Sequoia National Park. My favorite part of the fall, even though I couldn't capture it all that well, was that the water seemed to funnel up before hitting the top of the falls. It was just a really unique look and shape with a unique backdrop that I quite enjoyed. Just next door, and actually you can just hike here from Roaring River Falls if you prefer a longer hike, is the Zumwalt Meadows trail. This is a 1.5 mile out and back trail, but you can also make it a loop, which is what we did. On the contrary, the combination hike with Zumwalt Meadows and Roaring River Falls is 5.4 miles out and back, but it's also pretty easy. The Zumwalt Meadows trail wraps around a stunning grass meadow and offers some of the best views of the granite cliffs. This was my personal favorite hike at Kings Canyon National Park, as the collection of flora and fauna was absolutely incredible. The first thing we saw when we got out of our vehicle were stellar jays, which were absolutely everywhere in the Sierra Nevada National Parks. These birds are close relatives to the blue jay, which are found in eastern North America. Their color gradients are beautiful, and I never get tired of seeing these things on our trip. The first and last parts of the trail are forested and features a beautifully designed bridge that travels over another river. Then the trees open up and you get some outstanding views that'll let these shots speak for themselves. Coming up on the forested part that completes the loop, we notice tons of ferns, tall grass, trees with sap leaping down their trunks, a snake that I unfortunately did not have time to capture on video, and best of all, a deer. I noticed on our trip that the more vulnerable wildlife in the parks tend to be much more comfortable in less populated areas. When we spotted it, we were the only ones there until another group joined in, and before that, the deer was willing to get pretty close to us. We then met back up with the river before noticing a kaleidoscope of butterflies surrounding the boardwalk section that completes the loop. These butterflies came in all sorts of color variants, but were also generally pretty big compared to most butterflies I've seen. This was the best way we could have wrapped up the Zumwalt Meadows trail, which I can't recommend enough when you're visiting Kings Canyon National Park. A hidden feature of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks are their cave systems. While you can find the Crystal Cave in Sequoia National Park and that one is a little bit bigger, it's also done with much larger tour groups. I'll save my thoughts for the clientele at the end of the video, which yes, I should mention too, this is an upcharge attraction. Kings Canyon's Boyden Cavern can only be seen with a tour guide, which cost $16 a person when we went, which I'd say was a fair price in order to see the cave. They also offer a longer private tour for those in a party over 4 people. This is $45 a person, but it's absolutely what I'd recommend, and like I said, I'll save my thoughts for the end of the video for the crowds. The Boyden Cavern itself lies beneath the massive 2,000-foot high marble walls of the famous King's Gates. The cavern features stalactites, which are spikes that come from the ceiling, stalagmites, which are spikes coming from the ground, and many flowstone formations. It's absolutely awesome to see a cave like this in person, since it doesn't seem possible for something like it to truly exist. The formations are absolutely incredible, and I thoroughly enjoyed soaking it in. My favorite part of the tour was when they offered guests the chance to experience the adventure route, which is a narrow path filled with water that could sometimes be ankle deep. My brother and I came prepared though, and brought our waterproof hiking boots in preparation of doing this. It's a pretty neat alternative to the route that you came in with, so I'd absolutely recommend it. Now, the cave was really beautiful, but our experience was virtually ruined due to the tour guests disobeying every conceivable rule and being obnoxiously loud. Everyone was yelling over each other, including the tour guide, touching things that they were not supposed to touch, and we even saw a girl climb up to the regular path from the adventure route, which was the stupidest thing in the entire world. Obviously, tour guides can't control their guest behavior, but there can be change to the amount of people participating in one single tour. In my opinion, an easy way to improve the guest experience would just be to cap the tour size by at least half. I also don't know if kids under the age of 11 or 12 should be doing this either. While the adults were just as problematic, a lot of the younger kids were shouting and screaming, which obviously isn't helpful. If I someday want to come back and experience the Boyden Cavern, I'll definitely go with the private tour instead to see if that's any better. If not, I can't say I'd recommend the tour, which is a shame since the cave really is cool. To wrap up our visit to Kings Canyon National Park, we pulled off at some more viewpoints on the scenic byway, and I just can't stress enough how beautiful this route is. It's worth coming here alone to drive it. But anyways, at last, it was time to head towards Yosemite National Park for the next day of intense hiking. Kings Canyon National Park is absolutely outstanding and is basically a fusion between Sequoia National Park and Yosemite National Park. That is, with a fraction of the crowd levels, not to mention it was a Saturday near the beginning of summer. My hot take that I promised to include at the beginning of the video is that I prefer this park to Sequoia National Park next door. Sure, they're very similar parks, but excluding the backpacking hikes, the scenery at Kings Canyon is quite a bit more intense and dramatic than Sequoia's. That's why I'm left scratching my head that this park gets half the attendance as its older brother. If you can only visit one park or the other, I'd personally recommend to choose this one. Although you can't go wrong with either, Kings Canyon National Park features basically everything that makes Sequoia National Park great, even including the massive sequoia trees. That said, if you have one full day available, you should be able to wake up early and just visit most of the best spots in both parks. If you haven't watched my video from Sequoia National Park, go back and watch that one so that you can create a perfect itinerary combining it with Kings Canyon. Or if you have 2 days available like us, take your time and dedicate a day to both. There's still so much that we haven't seen in these two parks, and I can't wait for the day I get to return. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.